The violet light of Archeon's twin suns cast long shadows across the undulating metal structures of the crater observation station. Unlike the rigid, angular constructions of Earth's outposts, the crater architecture seemed alive, flowing, shifting slightly as if breathing. The liquid metal alloys that comprised their technology responded to environmental changes with subtle adjustments, creating an ever-changing landscape of gleaming surfaces. Isilla stood at the primary observation platform, her six-digited hands moving deftly across the control interface. As the lead biological researcher for the crater expedition, she possessed an intuitive understanding of chemical interactions that even the most advanced computational systems of her species couldn't replicate. Her elongated cranium housed specialized neural pathways that allowed her to visualize molecular bonds and predict reactions with remarkable accuracy, a genetic advantage that had propelled her to the leadership of this first contact mission. "The atmospheric readings have stabilized," she announced to her team, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic overtones of crater speech. "Oxygen levels remain higher than our homeworld, but within acceptable parameters for extended operation." Melik, the drone engineer, glanced up from his workstation. His metallic exoskeleton gleamed under the station lights, the living metal responding to his emotional state with subtle color shifts. "Perimeter drones report movement at the western approach. It appears our visitors have arrived." Isilla felt a flutter of anticipation ripple through her chemical receptors. The humans had responded to their transmission faster than expected. First contact was always delicate, especially with a species that had only recently developed interstellar capabilities. The Crater High Council had debated for months whether Earth was ready for official relations. But curiosity had ultimately prevailed. She moved to the observation window, her four eyes adjusting to focus on the distant horizon. The human vessel approached slowly, hovering several meters above the violet dust of Archeon's surface. Unlike the flowing lines of crater ships, the human craft was angular, practical, with visible weapon systems and heavy armor plating that spoke of a species accustomed to conflict. "They come prepared for hostilities," noted Saussure, the senior science advisor. His exoskeleton had darkened slightly, a sign of disapproval, or perhaps anxiety. "Their vessel is heavily fortified for a diplomatic mission." "They are cautious, not hostile," Isilla corrected, though she understood his concern. The crater civilization had evolved past weaponized technology centuries ago. Their biological advantages and superior understanding of molecular science, eliminating the need for conventional weapons. Remember, they evolved on a predator-rich world. Defensive posturing is ingrained in their culture. Saussure's exoskeleton lightened somewhat, but the senior scientist remained skeptical. "I've reviewed their historical transmissions. Their entertainment media is saturated with scenarios of hostile alien encounters. Their cultural programming predisposes them to anticipate conflict." "All the more reason to demonstrate peaceful intentions," Isilla replied, finalizing the welcome protocols. "Melik, deploy the greeting drones. Standard observation pattern. Maintain the agreed safety perimeter." Melik nodded, his fingers dancing across the liquid metal interface. Outside, a dozen spherical drones detached from the station, their polished surfaces catching the violet light as they formed a welcoming pattern in the sky. Each drone was equipped with multiple sensory apparatus and translation systems, but no defensive capabilities, a deliberate choice to demonstrate trust. As the human vessel settled onto the landing zone, Isilla observed the deployment of their expedition team. They moved with military precision, establishing a perimeter around their craft before allowing what appeared to be scientific personnel to emerge. All wore environmental suits with helmets that obscured their features, though the distinctive bipedal locomotion and proportions were exactly as their transmissions had depicted. "They're establishing a ground base rather than approaching our facility," Saussure noted, his tone critical. "Another sign of distrust." "Or prudence," Isilla countered. Their biological requirements are different from ours. They need to establish environmental controls and test compatibility before risking closer contact. The observation drones transmitted detailed imagery of the human expedition, setting up prefabricated structures with remarkable efficiency. Within hours, they had established a self-contained outpost complete with defensive perimeters and what appeared to be communications equipment aimed toward the crater station. Isilla monitored the activity with growing fascination. The humans moved with purpose, but also with a certain physical grace that the exoskeleton-dependent Kretar lacked. Their technology, while less advanced in many respects, showed impressive adaptability and robustness. "They're transmitting," Melik announced, as one of the observation drones registered an incoming communication signal. The message appeared on the central display, translated by their systems. "Greetings from Earth Expeditionary Force. We propose initial meeting at neutral coordinates between our positions at local dawn. Small delegation only. Awaiting confirmation." "Cautious, yet reasonable." Isilla nodded approvingly. "Send acknowledgement and agreement. We'll prepare a formal greeting party." As preparations continued through Archeon's brief night cycle, Isilla found herself increasingly intrigued by their visitors. The humans had established a remarkably complex base in minimal time, their efficiency suggesting a species well adapted to rapid deployment in hostile environments. Their biological adaptability was impressive, even through environmental suits. Their movements suggested a physical resilience the Kretar had lost generations ago when they'd begun augmenting their bodies with metallic exoskeletons. The dawn meeting would be historic, the first formal contact between two technologically advanced species. As lead biologist, Isilla would finally have the opportunity to observe humans up close, to begin understanding the complex carbon-based biochemistry that allowed such versatile organisms to thrive across varied environments. Little did she know that this first meeting would reveal a biological incompatibility more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated, one that would threaten not just diplomatic relations, but the very survival of the crater expedition. Dawn on Archeon arrived with a spectacular crimson flare as the primary sun crested the horizon, gradually joined by its smaller companion. The dual light sources created complex shadow patterns across the dusty plain where the meeting was to take place, exactly halfway between the human encampment and the crater station. Isilla led a small delegation, herself, Sosir as scientific advisor, and two assistants carrying data equipment and biological sampling tools. Melik remained at the station, controlling a cluster of observation drones that hovered discreetly above the meeting site, recording every detail of this historic encounter. The humans arrived simultaneously, emerging from their compound with the same military precision they'd displayed earlier. Their delegation consisted of 4 members, 2 in what appeared to be security roles, weapons visible but not raised, flanking what Isilla presumed were a diplomat and a scientist based on their different environmental suits. As the groups approached each other, Isilla activated the universal translation device. "Greetings, representatives of Earth. I am Isilla, biological research lead for the Crater Expeditionary Science Division. We welcome you to Archeon and look forward to peaceful exchange of knowledge." The human in the lead stepped forward, the environmental suit's external speakers crackling slightly as the translation system engaged. "Colonel James Stewart, commanding officer of Earth's First Contact Initiative. With me is Dr. Eleanor Reeves, our exobiology specialist." He gestured to the slightly shorter figure beside him, who nodded in acknowledgement. The formal introductions continued, but Isilla found herself distracted by the strange biological readings her sensors were detecting from the humans. Even through their environmental suits, her specialized perception could sense the complex iron-rich circulatory fluid that sustained them, so different from the copper-based system of the crater. The humans literally carried metal within their bodies, a concept both fascinating and slightly disturbing to Isila's scientific sensibilities. As protocol dictated, both sides presented small technological gifts, data crystals containing non-sensitive scientific and cultural information. The exchange proceeded smoothly until one of Melik's observation drones malfunctioned, suddenly dropping several meters before its stabilization systems engaged. The reaction from the human security personnel was immediate and dramatic. Both raised their weapons, pivoting to track the falling drone. Colonel Stewart barked an order, and the delegation began backing away. "No cause for alarm," Isila quickly transmitted. "Simple mechanical failure. The drone is non-offensive." The tension eased slightly, but the incident had clearly unsettled the humans. Saussure's exoskeleton had darkened significantly, his agitation visible. "Their response confirms my concerns. They are predisposed to perceive threats." Isila was about to disagree when the malfunctioning drone suffered a secondary failure. Its maintenance protocols activated, extending a small repair appendage, a thin metallic probe that gleamed in the morning light. To the creator, it was obviously a self-repair tool. But to the humans, the sudden extension of a metallic implement appeared threatening. One of the security officers reacted instinctively, swinging his weapon to knock the drone aside. The sudden movement caused the repair appendage to slice across the environmental suit of Dr. Reeves, creating a small tear in the outer layer. "Breach!" shouted Colonel Stewart, his voice sharp with alarm. "Medical Protocol Alpha!" The human delegation retreated rapidly, supporting Dr. Reeves, though Isila's sensors detected no immediate atmospheric danger to human physiology. More concerning was what happened next. As the humans withdrew, Isila noticed a small droplet of dark red fluid, human blood, had landed on the repair drone. Where the droplet touched the metallic surface, an immediate reaction occurred. The polished metal began to discolor, a spreading patch of reddish-brown corruption appearing on the previously pristine surface. "Saussure," Isila called urgently. "Are you seeing this?" The science advisor was already analyzing the reaction, his exoskeleton pulsing with alarm patterns. "The human biological fluid is causing rapid oxidation of our alloy. It's corroding our metal." The implications struck Isila with sudden clarity. The creator didn't just use metal in their technology. Their entire civilization was built upon metallic compounds. Their bodies were partially merged with exoskeletons, their buildings and ships constructed of the same advanced alloys. If human blood could cause such rapid degradation. "Recall all drones immediately," she ordered Melik through the communication link. "Establish a strict no-contact protocol. No creator technology is to approach within 50 meters of the human compound until we understand this reaction." As the creator delegation hastily returned to their station, the damaged drone was quarantined for analysis. Under Isila's direction, the tiny blood sample was isolated and studied with every instrument available. The results were deeply troubling. "It's their hemoglobin," Isila explained to the emergency council meeting 2 hours later. "The iron-based oxygen transport compound in their blood contains elements that catalyze oxidation in our particular alloy composition. Essentially, their blood turns our metal into rust." Saussure's exoskeleton had gone almost completely black, a sign of extreme distress. "This is catastrophic. Our entire infrastructure is vulnerable. If they realize this weakness..." "They likely don't understand it yet," Isila countered. "The reaction would appear as simple corrosion to them, not a specific incompatibility with our biology. Nevertheless, we must consider defensive measures," another council member insisted. "If this knowledge were weaponized..." "We're scientists, not warriors," Isila interrupted. "Our priority should be understanding and neutralizing the reaction, not preparing for conflict." The debate continued for hours, growing increasingly heated. The more conservative council members advocated for immediate withdrawal from Archeon, abandoning the research station entirely. Others, including Saussure, suggested more drastic measures, preemptive action against the human encampment to neutralize what they perceived as an existential threat. Isilla fought against these reactions, insisting on a scientific approach. "Give me time to analyze the compound further. There may be a simple neutralizing agent that can protect our alloys." Reluctantly, the Council granted her 48 hours to find a solution before they would vote on more extreme measures. As the meeting disbanded, Saussure approached her privately. "You're taking an enormous risk," he said. His voice lowered. "If you're wrong, you're endangering our entire species. And if I'm right, we avoid an unnecessary conflict," she replied steadily. "These humans didn't come here to attack us with their blood. Saussure, this is an accidental biological incompatibility. Nothing more." "Perhaps," he conceded, though his exoskeleton remained dark with doubt. "But remember, not all weapons are created intentionally. Sometimes the most dangerous threats are discovered by accident." As Isilla returned to her laboratory, she couldn't dismiss Saussure's warning entirely. Throughout known galactic history, first contact scenarios had occasionally ended in disaster, despite peaceful intentions on both sides. Biological incompatibilities had caused some of the most tragic outcomes. Airborne compounds harmless to one species proving toxic to another. Microbial exchanges decimating unprepared immune systems. But this situation was unprecedented. Human blood itself was a direct threat to Creator technology and, by extension, to Creator biology. She needed to understand precisely how the reaction occurred and, more importantly, how to stop it. Through the observation systems, she monitored the human encampment. They had enacted strict quarantine protocols around Dr. Reeves, suggesting they too were concerned about potential biological contamination. Their caution was admirable, if unnecessary. Archeon's atmosphere posed no direct threat to human physiology beyond the low pressure that their suits compensated for. What troubled Isilla more was the increased defensive posture of the human security forces. Additional weapons had been deployed around the perimeter of their compound, and their scanning equipment was now actively sweeping the surrounding terrain, including the direction of the Creator station. Colonel Stewart had transmitted a terse message. "Due to potential biological hazards, we are establishing expanded security protocols. Any approach by Creator personnel or equipment must be pre-approved through direct communication channels." The situation was deteriorating precisely as Saussure had feared. The humans' natural caution was escalating toward militaristic defensiveness. Isilla needed more data. Specifically, she needed additional samples of human blood to test potential neutralizing compounds. But requesting such samples now, after the incident, would likely be met with suspicion or outright refusal. A more direct approach was necessary. "Melik," she called to the drone engineer, who had been assisting with the analysis. "I need a stealth observation unit. Minimum metal content. Maximum biological components." Melik's exoskeleton pulsed with uncertainty. "You're planning to breach their security perimeter? The Council hasn't authorized such action." "I'm not breaching anything," Isilla clarified. "I'm establishing closer observation to gather critical data. The Council authorized me to find a solution. This is how I do it." Reluctantly, Melik assembled a specialized drone, using primarily biological components, grown in the station's cultivation chambers. The resulting device was small, roughly the size of a native Archeon flying creature, with minimal metallic elements carefully shielded behind synthetic membranes. Under cover of darkness, Isilla deployed the biodrone, guiding it carefully toward the human compound. Its sensors were specifically calibrated to detect and analyze human biological signatures without direct contact. If she could gather detailed readings on the exact composition of their blood, perhaps she could synthesize a comparable sample for testing without risking further diplomatic incidents. The biodrone performed flawlessly, hovering near the medical section of the human compound, recording detailed biological data through the structure's thin walls. The humans appeared to be conducting their own analysis of the incident, with Dr. Reeves apparently unharmed, but undergoing extensive medical scans. Isilla was so focused on the biological readings that she almost missed the security alert. One of the human scanning systems had detected the biodrone despite its stealth capabilities. Alarms blared within the compound, and security personnel rushed to defensive positions. "Withdraw immediately," she commanded the drone, but it was too late. A pulse of energy, some kind of electromagnetic weapon, struck the biodrone, disabling its propulsion systems. It fell to the ground, just outside the compound perimeter. Within moments, armed humans had surrounded the fallen drone, their weapons trained on it as they established a quarantine field. Through the drone's failing visual sensors, Isilla watched helplessly as Colonel Stewart himself approached, his expression unreadable behind his environmental visor. "Isilla!" Saussure's voice came from behind her, his tone cold with fury. "The Council has been informed of your unauthorized surveillance operation. They're convening an emergency session." The emergency council meeting was brief and hostile. Saussure led the opposition, his exoskeleton now pulsing with aggressive patterns as he addressed the assembled leaders. "This reckless action has confirmed our worst fears," he declared. "The humans have responded with military force to a simple observation drone. They've demonstrated their aggressive nature and now possess Creator technology for analysis." "A non-weaponized biological drone," Isilla countered. "And they responded defensively, not aggressively. There's an important distinction." "A distinction without a difference," Saussure snapped. "Their compound now bristles with weapons aimed at our station. They've suspended all communication except to demand explanations for what they call espionage. The diplomatic situation is untenable." The council leader, a veteran researcher named Kalir, raised her hands for silence. "What matters now is containment. Isilla, what have we learned about the blood-metal reaction?" "Not enough," Isilla admitted reluctantly. "Initial analysis suggests the iron compounds in human hemoglobin catalyze oxidation when in contact with our particular alloy composition. The reaction is accelerated by enzymatic components in their plasma that we haven't fully identified. And potential countermeasures. I've identified several promising neutralizing agents, but without additional testing, which would require more human blood samples," Saussure interrupted. "Samples they will never voluntarily provide now that trust has been broken." The debate continued, growing increasingly polarized between those who supported scientific resolution and those who advocated for more drastic measures. Finally, a vote was called. The decision was devastating. By a narrow margin, the Council authorized preparation of defensive measures, including a last resort option to neutralize the human compound entirely if they showed any sign of weaponizing their biological advantage. "You have 24 hours to continue your research," Kalir informed Isilla. "After that, if no solution is found, we will evacuate essential personnel and equipment. The station itself will be rigged with molecular dissolution charges as a precaution against human acquisition of our technology." "And the humans?" Isilla asked, already knowing the answer. "If they attempt to approach the station during evacuation, defensive measures will be authorized." As the council disbanded, Isilla remained at her station, her mind racing. The situation had spiraled beyond scientific inquiry into the realm of potential conflict, exactly the outcome she had hoped to avoid. The humans, sensing danger, but not understanding its nature, had retreated into defensive posturing. The Creator, equally fearful, were preparing for the worst. Someone needed to break this cycle of escalation before it led to tragedy. The plan formed in Isilla's mind gradually, crystallizing into clarity as the station's night cycle began. It was reckless, potentially suicidal, and would certainly end her career if she survived. It also might be the only way to prevent disaster. She worked through the night, synthesizing a specialized protective coating for her exoskeleton, a molecular barrier that laboratory tests suggested might resist the corrosive effects of human blood. It was untested in field conditions, but it was the best protection available. She also prepared a comprehensive data package on the blood-metal reaction, including all her research and potential neutralizing compounds. If her mission failed, at least the humans would understand what had happened and why. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Isilla slipped out of the station through a maintenance access port, bypassing the security protocols she herself had helped design. Her exoskeleton was coated in the experimental protective layer, giving it a dull, matte appearance instead of the usual metallic sheen. The journey across the barren terrain between the station and the human compound was tense but uneventful. Isilla moved slowly, transmitting a continuous signal, identifying herself as a single, unarmed individual approaching for diplomatic purposes. She carried no weapons or technology beyond her exoskeleton and a small data transmission device. As expected, she was detected long before reaching the compound perimeter. Human security forces deployed immediately, establishing a containment position with weapons ready, but not yet firing. Isilla raised her upper limbs in the universal gesture of peaceful intent, continuing her slow approach. When she was approximately 50 meters from the perimeter, a familiar voice came through her communication system. "Halt immediately. Identify yourself and state your purpose." Colonel Stewart's tone was clipped, professional, revealing nothing of his personal feelings about this unexpected development. "I am Isilla, Biological Research Lead," she replied calmly. "I come alone, without authorization from my government, to prevent a disastrous misunderstanding between our species." There was a long pause before Stewart responded. "Your people deployed surveillance technology against our compound after agreeing to communication protocols. Explain this violation." "I deployed that technology without authorization," Isilla admitted. "My actions were driven by scientific necessity, not hostile intent. I need to speak with you and Dr. Reeves immediately regarding a serious biological incompatibility between our species, one that threatens to escalate to conflict if not addressed." Another pause, longer this time. Isilla could imagine the debate occurring within the human command structure. Finally, Stewart's voice returned. "Approach the designated point and await further instructions. Any deviation will be considered hostile action." A marker appeared on her navigation system, a point 10 meters outside the compound's physical perimeter. Isilla moved toward it slowly, aware that dozens of human weapons were trained on her. One wrong move, one misunderstanding, and she would never complete her mission. At the designated point, she stopped and waited. Minutes passed in tense silence before a small delegation emerged from the compound. Colonel Stewart, Dr. Reeves, and 2 security personnel. All wore full environmental suits with sealed helmets, though Isilla's sensors detected that the atmosphere was within acceptable parameters for human respiration. "You've taken an extraordinary risk coming here alone," Stewart said, his voice less hostile but still wary. "The risk of doing nothing was greater," Isilla replied. "Colonel, are you aware that human blood causes rapid deterioration of crater alloys? The small cut Dr. Reeves sustained resulted in blood contact with our drone. That blood immediately began corroding the metal, a reaction we've never encountered before." Dr. Reeves stepped forward, her scientific curiosity evidently overriding caution. "Corrosion from blood contact? That's unprecedented." "For both our species," Isilla agreed. "But potentially catastrophic for mine. Cretar technology, our habitats, even our exoskeletons are composed of alloys vulnerable to this reaction. My council views this as an existential threat, one severe enough that they're considering extreme measures." Stewart's posture stiffened. "Are you delivering a threat, Isilla?" "A warning," she corrected. And an opportunity. I've been researching potential neutralizing agents that could prevent the reaction. With proper cooperation between our scientists, we could develop a protective treatment for crater alloys, eliminating the threat entirely. And why come alone? Stewart pressed. Why not through official channels? Because official channels have broken down into fear and preparation for conflict, Isilla explained. My council has authorized evacuation, followed by molecular dissolution of our entire station to prevent technology transfer. If your forces approach during that evacuation, she left the implication hanging. When? Stewart asked sharply. The evacuation begins in approximately 20 of your Earth hours. I have until then to find a solution, or the countdown initiates. Dr. Reeves turned to Stewart. Colonel, this is consistent with the material analysis we've been conducting on the captured drone. The alloy shows unusual susceptibility to oxidation, catalyzed by biological compounds. If their entire technology base shares this vulnerability. Stewart nodded slowly, his tactical mind evidently processing the implications. You're risking everything by coming here, aren't you, Isilla? If your council discovers your unauthorized contact. My career is already forfeit, she acknowledged. But preventing conflict between our species is worth the sacrifice. A long moment of silence followed as Stewart appeared to make his decision. Finally, he gestured toward the compound entrance. Dr. Reeves will escort you to our laboratory. You'll remain under guard at all times, and any technology you bring will be thoroughly scanned. These terms are non-negotiable. Understood and accepted, Isilla replied, relief flooding her system. It was a start, a fragile opportunity to bridge the gap of misunderstanding before it widened into an unbridgeable chasm. The human laboratory was fascinating, simultaneously more primitive and more innovative than crater facilities. Where crater science relied on molecular precision and quantum processing, human technology showed remarkable adaptability and redundancy. Their equipment was bulkier, less elegant, but designed to function under adverse conditions that would render crater technology inoperable. Dr. Reeves proved to be a brilliant collaborator, quickly grasping the molecular mechanics of the blood-metal reaction once Isilla shared her research data. It's the combination of iron ions and specific enzymes in our blood, she explained, examining the molecular models Isilla had brought. The iron acts as a catalyst, while the enzymes break down certain molecular bonds in your alloy structure. Precisely, Isilla confirmed. In isolation, neither component would cause significant damage. Together, they create a cascading reaction that spreads through the metal lattice. Working together, they began testing various compounds against samples of human blood. Dr. Reeves had volunteered a small amount for the experiments, carefully extracted and handled under strict protocols. Each test brought them closer to understanding the exact mechanism of the reaction. The irony isn't lost on me, Reeves commented as they worked. Iron in our blood destroying iron alloys in your technology. It's like our very biology is inherently hostile to yours, despite neither of us intending harm. A perfect illustration of why scientific understanding must precede diplomatic relations. Isilla agreed. Without knowing the cause, both sides interpreted the reaction according to their worst fears. As hours passed, Colonel Stewart periodically checked on their progress, his initial suspicion gradually giving way to cautious optimism. The security presence remained, but the atmosphere had shifted from hostile standoff to tentative collaboration. By the 18th hour, they had achieved a breakthrough. A specific molecular compound, synthesized from materials available on both the human ship and the crater station, demonstrated near-perfect resistance to the corrosive effect of human blood. It creates a self-healing molecular barrier, Isilla explained, displaying the test results. When applied to our alloys, it prevents the catalytic reaction while maintaining all desirable properties of the metal. And it can be mass-produced? Stewart asked. Easily, Dr. Reeves confirmed. The components are common industrial chemicals. We could produce enough to treat your entire station within days. The solution had been found. But a critical problem remained. The Creator Council was still proceeding with evacuation plans, unaware of Isilla's breakthrough. With communication channels restricted, she had no way to transmit the results or halt the countdown. "I need to return to the station immediately," she told Stewart. Without direct intervention, the evacuation proceeds as planned. "That's a problem," Stewart replied grimly. "Our sensors have detected increased activity at your station. Energy signatures consistent with preparation for large-scale molecular dissolution. If you're discovered approaching from our compound..." The implication was clear. Isilla would be considered compromised or coerced, a potential security threat rather than a returning scientist. In the heightened state of alert, she might be neutralized before having a chance to explain. "Then I need a more dramatic approach," she decided, one that forces both sides to listen before acting. The plan they devised was audacious and fraught with risk. Using a human transport vehicle, Stewart would personally escort Isilla to a position halfway between the compounds, the same neutral ground where first contact had occurred. From there, they would broadcast simultaneously to both the human expedition leadership and the Creator Council, presenting their findings and the solution they developed. "It's a significant risk," Stewart warned as they prepared. "Elements on both sides may see this as a provocation." "Which is why both of us must go," Isilla insisted. A human and a creator, standing together, demonstrating that cooperation is possible. As they departed the human compound in a small transport vehicle, Isilla felt a strange calm descend over her. The outcome was uncertain, the danger very real, but the path was clear. Science had provided the solution. Now courage would be required to implement it. They reached the neutral zone, just as Archeon's twin suns reached their zenith, bathing the dusty plain in harsh violet light. Stewart positioned the vehicle precisely at the midpoint between the compounds, then activated a powerful broadcast transmitter that would override standard communication protocols on both sides. "This is Colonel James Stewart of the Earth Expeditionary Force, broadcasting to all personnel. I am accompanied by lead researcher Isilla of the Creator Expedition. We have critical information regarding the biological incompatibility discovered between our species. We request immediate cessation of all defensive preparations and your full attention." Isilla continued the broadcast in her native language, then switched to the translation system for the humans' benefit. "Attention Creator High Council. This is Isilla. The blood metal reaction has been neutralized. I repeat, we have synthesized a compound that completely prevents corrosion of our alloys when in contact with human biological material. Evacuation procedures and defensive preparations are no longer necessary." For several tense moments, there was no response from either compound. Then, simultaneously, acknowledgments came through from both sides. Saussure's voice came through first, his tone incredulous. "Isilla, you breached security protocols and contacted the humans directly. The Council is demanding explanation." "The explanation is simple," she replied steadily. "Scientific cooperation has succeeded where fear and isolation would have failed. I will accept whatever consequences the Council deems appropriate after you've reviewed the data we're transmitting." As the technical information transferred to both compounds, Isilla and Stewart remained at the neutral point, a physical demonstration of the partnership they proposed. Minutes stretched into an hour as the data was analyzed and verified by scientists on both sides. Finally, Kalir herself responded from the Creator Station. "Initial analysis confirms your findings. Isilla, the neutralizing compound appears viable. The Council is reconsidering the evacuation order." Almost simultaneously, a message came through from the human leadership. "Dr. Reeves confirms the effectiveness of the treatment. We are standing down from elevated security posture and propose immediate implementation of the protective protocol for all Creator structures. The immediate crisis had been averted, but the diplomatic damage required additional healing. Over the following days, joint scientific teams worked to apply the protective treatment to all Creator technology, beginning with the station itself and the exoskeletons of personnel most likely to interact with humans. A formal inquiry was conducted into Isila's unauthorized actions. But with the successful resolution of the crisis, the Council found itself unable to impose severe sanctions. Instead, she was officially recognized for extraordinary scientific achievement under adverse circumstances, a diplomatic phrasing that acknowledged both her violation of protocol and the positive outcome it had produced. Saussure, surprisingly, became one of her strongest advocates during the proceedings. "While I cannot condone the methods," he stated for the record, "I must acknowledge that Isila's actions prevented what could have been a disastrous first contact scenario. Her willingness to risk personal consequences for scientific truth embodies the highest ideals of Creator research tradition." 1 month after the initial incident, a formal treaty was signed between the Creator and human expeditions. The document, drafted jointly by both species, established protocols for scientific cooperation, cultural exchange, and biological safety measures. A special addendum, informally known as the Blood and Steel Protocol, detailed procedures for preventing and addressing potential biochemical incompatibilities between species. In the newly established joint laboratory, Isila and Dr. Reeves continued their collaborative research. What had begun as a potential catastrophe had transformed into an unprecedented opportunity to understand the fundamental differences and surprising similarities between their biologies. "It's remarkable," Reeves commented as they examined molecular comparisons between human and Creator cellular structures. "Our evolutionary paths diverged completely, developed on worlds light-years apart. Yet certain biochemical principles remain constant, different implementations of the same fundamental processes." "Perhaps that's the true lesson here," Isila replied thoughtfully. "Not that our differences make us incompatible, but that our similarities provide the foundation for understanding those differences." Colonel Stewart, passing through the laboratory on his way to a diplomatic meeting, overheard their conversation. "An elegant summary," he acknowledged with a slight smile, a human expression Isila was still learning to interpret. "Though I might add a military perspective. Sometimes the greatest threats aren't the ones we anticipate, but the ones we never imagined." "All the more reason for scientific cooperation," Isila countered. "The unknown becomes less threatening when explored together rather than feared separately." As the colonel departed, Saussure entered the laboratory, his exoskeleton now displaying the calm, balanced coloration of scientific focus rather than the dark patterns of suspicion he had worn during the crisis. "The protective coating is performing beyond expectations," he reported. "Application to our orbital vessels will be complete within days." "Excellent," Isila nodded. "And the long-term modification to our alloy composition?" "Early tests are promising. By adjusting the molecular structure at the manufacturing stage, we may be able to produce inherently resistant materials for future applications." Dr. Reeves looked up from her work with interest. "You're reformulating your entire metallurgical basis because of this incident?" "We're adapting," Saussure corrected, "as any successful species must. This incompatibility was discovered by accident, but there may be others we haven't yet encountered. Better to incorporate resistance now than face crisis later." Isila observed the exchange with satisfaction. What had begun as fear and misunderstanding had evolved into genuine scientific collaboration. The protective barrier they had developed wasn't just a coating for metal. It was a metaphorical bridge between species, allowing close contact without harm to either. As Archeon's twin suns set on another day of joint research, Isila reflected on the fragility and resilience of interspecies relations. The margin between catastrophic conflict and productive partnership had been razor-thin, hinging on the willingness of individuals from both sides to reach across the divide of misunderstanding. Blood and steel, biological fluid and technological foundation, had nearly become symbols of irreconcilable difference. Instead, through science and cooperation, they had become the catalyst for unprecedented understanding. The very incompatibility that threatened disaster had ultimately forged a stronger alliance than either side might have achieved through conventional diplomacy. In the growing twilight, the human compound and Crater Station no longer stood as isolated outposts on a barren world. Connected by regular shuttles, shared research facilities, and the constant exchange of personnel and knowledge, they had become the foundation of something new, a joint presence that represented not just peaceful coexistence, but active collaboration between species. The rusted drone that had triggered the crisis now occupied a place of honor in the joint laboratory, a physical reminder that even the most alarming discoveries could lead to positive outcomes when approached with scientific rigor rather than fear. Its corroded surface, partially restored and partially preserved in its damaged state, symbolized both the challenge they had faced and the solution they had found together. As night fell completely, the lights of both compounds illuminated the darkness of Archeon, no longer separate beacons, but components of a single, collaborative presence on this distant world. What had begun in misunderstanding had transformed into something neither species could have achieved alone, a template for future encounters across the vast, still largely unexplored galaxy. Blood and steel, once accidental adversaries, had become the foundation of a new chapter in interstellar relations, proving that even the most fundamental incompatibilities could be overcome through science, courage, and the shared pursuit of understanding.